Oh, yeah. Jonathan Emore, the lawyer, he actually helped us sue the FDA 8 times in federal court. We prevailed every time. In one case, we actually went up to the Supreme Court, and they signed off on the suit, and we won it by default. So very proud of those things. And because of that, we have folic acid in prenatal vitamins to prevent spina bifida now.
That was your discovery.
That was it. And then also we got the ability to say you can prevent stroke and coronary thrombosis and pulmonary embolism by supplementing with omega-3 essential fatty acids. And then the one I really love is you can prevent cancer by supplementing with selenium. And they just fought tooth and nail to keep that.
But finally, they admit that.
Well, they didn't admit it, but the federal judge gave it to us. Okay.
But I mean, in mainline medical literature, they now admit that.
Well, yes.
I mean, they admit if you don't have this, you're going to get this. I mean, your genes, your body needs this.
Well, you've said it exactly right, Alex. And that's the whole.
I read your book.
You said it exactly right. That you can have the greatest genes in the world, but if you don't give them the raw materials, and your dad and I had this great discussion about the minerals that are necessary as cofactors and catalysts for the genes to work, for the DNA to work, for the RNA to work, you can have DNA that will get you to live to be 200 in a healthful way. But if you're not getting these cofactors, you might die at 48 of a heart attack, even though you have the potential or capacity to get to.
And that's been proven by the marathon runners or some of the shortest lived people because they're not getting the minerals.
Exactly. And they sweat out what they do get.
Yeah, they're drinking 3 minerals, not all the dozens more they need.
That's right. The sports drinks that they use preferentially because of advertisement has 2 minerals in it. The next one has 6 minerals. Our Rebound has 100 nutrients in it, including 77 minerals.
And now it's the hottest thing in the NBA.
Exactly. NBA, the hockey leagues in Canada, the United States, the soccer leagues. And we have the Harlem Globetrotters. The entire team uses it. The team from Colorado, the Denver Nuggets, the entire team uses this stuff. And so we're very, very excited about this because they're setting the example. It's very tragic. We have about 10,000 kids under the age of 18 who drop dead suddenly each year.
Playing basketball.
Almost all basketball players.
And they kept wondering why, and then
it's a selenium deficiency. They get cardiomyopathy, heart attacks.
The heart needs a selenium. It's electrochemical. It runs out of gas. Zip.
Exactly, and it causes sudden death. And I went to China and actually did 1,700 autopsies on kids under the age of 10 that died in Qishan province from this disease. Got it published. And it was for other things, but for cystic fibrosis and muscular dystrophy, which are more stories. But and so all these pieces of information are in this book, Epigenetics, and it teaches people how to maximize their life.
Well, I mean, our genetics are the same as they were 50 years ago. Why is breast cancer up 3,000%? No one well, we know there's glyphosates. We're not getting the proper minerals. I mean, it's real simple. I mean, but they never want to discuss why all these diseases are off the chart. You know the story of Ted Anderson's dad had Alzheimer's.
Oh, yes.
And then he literally came back, knew who he was, could go fishing, had short-term, long-term memory. And the doctor said, hey, you got vitamin K in your blood. Are you eating spinach? You're not supposed to be doing that. I have you on Coumadin, so you won't have strokes. And ordered him off, and they followed the order, and his dad didn't know who he was in a month. I mean, that's literally like sacrificing yourself. And I have the authorization to tell the story, so I tell it, where people do what the doctor tells them.
Well, you've got your finger on the pulse of what is happening. I just really appreciate you so much because of that. I think you're probably the most well-informed person in America. And you're exactly right. Doctors just look at charts, and I used to think they're criminals, but I think they're just ignorant. And
well, they have Dead Doctors Don't Lie, your syndicated radio program. Tell us about that. I mean, that doesn't lie. They don't live too long.
Well, the average lifespan, Alex, of a medical doctor is 56. Why would anybody want to listen to somebody whose average lifespan is 56 to learn how to live to be 100 and healthy?
I want to listen to an old black lady in East Texas who lived to be 106 because she ate clay out of her backyard every week.
Ah, well, she was getting minerals, wasn't she?
Yeah, I mean, those old black women, they go. You can see them to this day, and other people now copy them, and they sell it. As you know, they go and they smell it, they taste it, and they get the clay out of the clay banks. And just like you'll catch pregnant women, wanting clay, wanting dirt. That's because what do deer go? They'll go and find dirt that has salt and minerals and start eating it. That's what mammals do.
You're exactly right. And of course, the Indian nations, Alex, used to fight wars over clay beds because they knew that their women would be fertile, they'd have normal births, that children would be born without birth defects if these women got access to the clay. It was very, very important for the survival of their nations. And we got into trouble. We know the exact moment that happened. It was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882. On Pearl Street in New York City, our health ended in America. And at that moment, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, on Pearl Street in New York City, Thomas Edison pulled the switch on the first commercial electric generating plant. Within 10 years, Alex, every industrialized nation switched from wood as the universal fuel to electricity. What happened was we no longer had the source of trace minerals and major minerals that we've been using for nutritional supplements for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, which was wood ashes, which we'd been putting in the garden. Well, now we went to electricity. We didn't have the wood ashes anymore, so we lost that source. We dammed up the river to make more electricity and stop the flooding, so we didn't have the silt being reimpregnated into the fields every year when the river flooded. Stopped that. After 25 years of the plant sucking the minerals out of the soil, we had to go to chemical fertilizers just to get yields and growth.
That then killed the microbes.
You got it. No nutrition, no microbes, and that's why America is sick.
Let's expand on the documentation in the book. I mean, just go through it chapter by chapter if you can. This is the one book everybody needs to read.
Absolutely. Of course, people have to appreciate, Alex, that the halls of science are filled with failed medical theories. Thousands of failed medical theories over the years.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt again, and I want him to turn my mic off because I'm just going to say this. This is what's so powerful here. Mm-hmm. This isn't even just about epigenetics. You assault the cult and all the other failed cults and prove that it's a failed cult, and if we don't turn it around, we're dead. Break it down.
The reason why people have to spend the time to read the book and do what it asks them to do is because our children are not going to live as long as us. Our children are the first generation that experts say will not live as long as their parents. And that's because there's no nutrition in the food, and they're following the false precepts of the medical system. Now, you go back to the beginning of time when things were written down in hieroglyphics and stone art and things. Doctors and physicians and philosophers and shamans and sorcerers believed that disease was caused by evil spirits, and the way to protect yourself was to burn goats to the evil spirits and make them happy, and then they'd look kindly upon you.
And the Greeks thought spontaneous generation, maggots just came out of meat.
That's exactly right, spontaneous generation. And then another one was the four humors, and if they didn't, black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood, and if you were sick, that meant they were out of balance, and they invented bloodletting about 2,000 years ago. They killed our first president, George Washington, who had dodged all the bullets from the British. And
the father of psychiatry killed him.
Yeah, exactly. Killed him by bloodletting. And they still did bloodletting in America up until 1920. Now, here comes one that I've been looking for this for 35 years, and I found it, Alex. And that is the first scientific article that showed that saturated fats were unhealthy and the vegetable oils and the unsaturated fats, olive oil, coconut oil, were healthy. I've looked for 35 years, and I finally found it 2 months ago in a 2 full-page article in the Wall Street Journal. They did research, 2 full pages. The story goes back to 1901. There was a German scientist by the name of Wilhelm Naumann who invented a machine lubricant for big factories. He made it out of cottonseed oil and also using a little cofactor called copper to turn it into a solid, and they couldn't sell it as soap because people were making soap, and so Procter & Gamble bought it from him and sold it as a food called Crisco, and they killed animal fats, butter and cream, and lard to sell Crisco.
I want to give you the floor to really go through the book with people and give them some of the secrets that weren't secrets 100 years ago so we can really fight back against this sickness system where not the doctors, but the brain bugs up top, the Rockefeller-run medicine, they know exactly what they're doing.
You're exactly right. And, of course, the Rockefellers, they go way back to the beginning of 1914 in what was called the Flexner Report. The Rockefellers and the Carnegies paid for a report to be made on all of the various medical schools, about 132 medical schools, and they funded 32 of them because they sold the products that the Carnegies and the Rockefellers sold. And they didn't give any money to the other medical schools, so they just dried up and died. They paid legislators at the federal and the state levels to make medical doctors king, if you will, a protected monopoly, self-policing, and They also paid to have all their competition made into third-class citizens who would not be paid by insurance.
Because competition's a sin, as John D. Rockefeller said. I interrupted, though, with a break. Going back, finish up with the machine oils, what we eat.
Okay, well, yes, the Crisco started out as a machine oil for all these huge factories in Europe and the United States. And Procter & Gamble bought it initially to make soap out of it. And there was resistance from mom and grandmom because they were making their own soap. And so they had to figure out that, we could probably sell more of this stuff, this machine oil, as food than we can as soap. And so they began to sell it as food. They got resistance again because grandma and mom had been using lard and cream and butter for centuries. And so they got Ansel Keys, who's another Nazi sympathizer who was on the board of the American Heart Association. And so Procter & Gamble said, we can't sell it as soap. We can't sell it as a machine oil anymore because the main original guys who made it were selling it faster than they could. And so we're going to sell it as food. And they couldn't, they were getting resistance. And so this Ansel Keys, who was on the board of the American Heart Association and on the board of Procter & Gamble, he says, well, let's sell it as a replacement for animal fats. And they came up with an advertising scheme to replace cream and butter and lard with this Crisco, which was a machine oil. And they did it very well. They gave $1.7 million to the American Heart Association. This is part of their written history. They cannot deny it. And they endorsed Crisco as a healthy replacement for animal fats like lard and cream and butter for cooking. And as a result, they have killed more Americans and more Europeans than the Nazis ever thought of doing because of heart disease caused by these oils.
In fact, I've seen some doctors and people looking at the statisticians, they believe that these type of false artificial garbage fats that replaced animal fat and natural plant fats may have killed more than cigarettes.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people. Just by mistakes in offices right now, medical doctors in America kill, injure, and infect 15 million Americans every year in their offices.
We had an article a few years ago that we wrote because it was right there on their site where even the Centers for Disease Control lists doctors killing people as the number 3 cause of death in the country.
Well, it's actually accidents by doctors. Number 3. Yeah. Doctors are number 1. Just proactively what they do. They killed Andy Rooney. They killed Dick Clark. They killed Neil Armstrong. And they get a walk. They kill these very famous people, very high-profile people. Who kills our top astronaut and gets a walk? If Al-Qaeda would have done that, we'd have sent over drones and blown up baby food factories or something. And here the doctor kills Neil Armstrong, our top astronaut. Okay, well, I want to go on to one more thing there. The theory that vegetable oils were healthier for you than animal
Yes,
fats,
let's get into it.
It was actually the thing that has killed more people than all the Nazis ever thought of, more than any cigarettes. And, of course, doctors just keep plodding on, even though the FDA came out in February of 2012, said get people off of cholesterol-lowering drugs, get their cholesterol back up. Cholesterol-lowering drugs increase your risk of Alzheimer's disease by 100%, type 2 diabetes by 52%, get them off of statin drugs, and doctors still give them. Well, the next theory that failed was the theory that prions cause mad cow disease and Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease. They've never been able to have that proven and transmitted, so they never were able to transmit the disease by taking brains of somebody who died.
What is it really? Yeah, it's a mystery.
It's a copper deficiency.
Yeah.
We actually knew that in 1865. It was a copper deficiency in sheep called enzootic ataxia. When you look at the brain under the microscope of a sheep with enzootic ataxia, it's mad cow disease, it's Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease in people. It's all caused by...
That's right. They just make up a misdiagnosis and make up a new term.
Exactly. And then came the genetics thing. Everything is caused by genetics. We've spent trillions of dollars mapping out the human genome. 28 countries are involved. 60 years. The genome was published in 2003. And in March of 2013, the Salk Institute invites James Watson, the guy who got the Nobel Prize for the double helix. Well, he is a eugenics guy.
Yeah.
He wants to use eugenics to make the master race.
He says black people aren't humans.
Well, he's the master race guy. Well, they ask him, okay, what diseases are going to be cured now? You've gone 60 years. You've mapped out the human genome. There has not been a single disease that's been cured or prevented with genetics. Which one are there? And he gets up in front of this illustrious crowd of Nobel Prize winners and heads of departments of genetics in medical schools, and he says, all the experiments we've done over the last 60 years are irrelevant. We're not going to cure cancer, diabetes, or any other diseases by sequencing genes and coming up with genetically engineered genes. It's not going to happen because none of it's genetic. It's all what he called chemistry, biochemistry, a.k.a. nutrition. And all the reporters ran out of the room. They called their editors. Their editors talked to the medical schools. The medical said, oh, he's an old man. And there's two pieces. Number one, if you're missing the cofactors, essentially the nutrients, minerals, vitamins, amino acids, fatty acids, which puts you in a very fragile state. You cannot even exist in your environment you're designed for. And then you throw in these toxins that have been created by these monsters of the industry called the pharmaceutical industry. And, of course, that's how we got paid for the war debt in the Second World War. The reparations where we got all of the pharmaceutical companies, which were not publicly traded companies when they were in Germany. They were all Nazis. They were supporting Hitler in the war. And they were privately owned. We're talking about Bayer and Pfizer.
Yeah, Germany was dominating chemicals and pharmacological. Yes. Just dominating.
Exactly. And so we took them as payment for the war debt, turned them into publicly traded companies.
Even kept their original heads.
Oh, yeah.
It's all in the book. And also, I mean, they knew 20 years ago, as you write about in the book, where they did these different worm studies and animal studies where they would give them super high nutrient diets, low calorie diets. You say it's a higher one's what's needed. And that they live 3 times longer, the worms.
Yes.
The mice live twice as long. One mouse fed the American diet, can't walk. The other one at the same age is running around in circles and lives 3 times as long. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, it's just the basic needs. Again, we talked about earlier in the show, everybody has great genes. But if you're not giving them the raw materials to maximize their ability to achieve the genetic potential, just like a car can go 300,000 miles before you need a new engine. But if you put 6 quarts of water in the crankcase instead of 6 quarts of oil, you might not even go the distance that you would get on a tank of gas. And so you have to do the same thing with your genes. You have to give your genes every nutrient necessary to maximize that potential. And nutritional deficiencies are repeatable. And so this is where I come from. These are repeatable.
Well, you know the studies, the hospitals have the worst food of any place.
Absolutely. You want to get sick, you want to die, go to a hospital. In fact, it was a cover article, March 2008, in the AARP Monthly Bulletin. The worst place to be in America when you're sick is an American hospital.
In closing, talk about breast cancer.
Okay, well, breast cancer is a community-inflicted disease. You said it very well there. You can reduce the risk of breast cancer, Alex, by 462% in any individual woman if she totally avoids eating burnt meat. If she cooks her steak medium rare instead of well done, and doctors say eat your meat well done to avoid E. coli and salmonella. I'd rather deal with salmonella and E. coli than I would breast cancer, right? You can reduce the risk of breast cancer by 462% just by eating the meat cooked medium rare instead of well done. You can reduce your risk of breast cancer by 82% by supplementing with that one mineral, selenium. And that was one of my lawsuits against the FDA, which I prevailed in federal court. And then you can actually increase your risk of prostate cancer by 69% by being selenium deficient. I take a milligram a day. You're supposed to take in 200 micrograms, 1/5 of a milligram, but I take in a milligram, a full 1,000 micrograms a day.
You want total bioavailability.
Exactly. And I just swamp myself to prevent congestive heart failure and a type of dementia that looks like Alzheimer's disease called Korsakoff syndrome, which both congestive heart failure and Korsakoff is a deficiency of a single vitamin.